Welcome back to Sacred Synergy, episode number 9. It has been about a month since I released the last episode with Angela Mano. While I had been releasing episodes about every 2 weeks, as was my goal, life has had other plans and my bandwidth has become very limited over the last month or so. Obligations with my wife and children, my larger family, as well as preparing for the 2 talks that I offered at the Triduum retreat at Daylesford Abbey have kept me quite busy over the past month. Today is April 9th, which means that we are less than 1 month away from the release of my book, Sacred Synergy, Spiritual and Psychological Growth in an Evolving World. The book is being published with Paulus Press, and it will be available for purchase beginning on May 5th, Cinco de Mayo. If you have the Spring-Summer 2026 new release catalog from Paulus, you can find Sacred Synergy on page 10. Being my first major publication, I was very excited to see this catalog just the other week. And in promotion of my new book, I will be giving a webinar with the Center for Christogenesis on Thursday, April 16th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. The talk is entitled Explicitly Embodied, Exploring the Sacred Synergy of Spirit and Psyche, and presents an integrated perspective on spiritual growth as an expression of our conscious evolution. It draws on the insight that spiritual awakening is a process of embodiment, and it proposes that the psyche and spirit mature together through lived relational and incarnational experience. I will include a link for registration in the description. Finally, I want to plug 2 upcoming retreat and conference opportunities. As I've mentioned many times before, the American Teilhard Association will gather for its annual event and retreat at Daylesford Abbey in Paoli, Pennsylvania from May 29th through 31st. Additionally, the Center for Christogenesis is hosting a conference at Villanova University from November 9th through 11th. I will be at both events, God willing, and I look forward to the possibility of connecting with some of you there. Now, today's featured guest is a good friend, Jason Willits. Jason and I met in 2022 through the American Teilhard Association, and our shared appreciation for Teilhard's work quickly grew into a friendship. We recorded this video back in February, just days before Jason and his wife moved from the East Coast back to the Midwest. While we could have recorded in person, it was easier for us to connect online in the interest of time. Plus, Jason had a sweet podcasting setup that he was about to break down in preparation for his move. I have faith that the final use of his computer, microphone, and camera while on the East Coast will convey the dynamism of Jason's personality to our viewers and listeners. We cover lots of ground on this episode, so do your best to try and keep up. It is peppered with humor, accompanying deep insight and reflection about the current state of the world, existential crisis and existential growth, while also drawing on Jason's experiences being deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan, along with the work he has done to reintegrate back into life stateside as a veteran. Above all, Jason offers a resounding call to all people to participate in the world with the spirit of humility and service. His lived witness of his faith and desire to continually be more and become more are inspiring to me, and I trust that you will find something from Jason's words that motivate you as well. Jason, thank you so much for being with us on Sacred Synergy.
Oh, thank you for having me, man. It's a real honor.
Oh, absolutely. We were talking about before, everyone on this show is an acquaintance that I have some sort of personal connection with, but you're a true friend and been very grateful to have you close to home here the past few years. But you're a guy who's had a reach well, you have a reach well beyond your geographic locality. So interested to hear a little bit about what you have going on today in our conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. It's been great, honestly. Uh, Coming out honestly to be more involved with the American Association, and specifically bounce some ideas off of you, really has been a mission achieved. I feel it's been great. Um, Knowing that we've hit it off as well is just such great. That's such a cherry on top of things to know that I do see you as a friend and feel that very much.
Thank you so much, man. It's mutual. Yeah. So I forget, what is it, 2021, 22 we connected? It was shortly after COVID and that whole massive shutdown and just life screeching to a halt as we knew it, and now still emerging into this new world we're in where there's so much shifting and changing. a lot to hope for, a lot to be concerned about. So one thing I remember you saying about that COVID time was just how grateful you were for all of the opportunities that it allowed you to plug into. So I want to get to that eventually. But that was just a little backstory about like when we met. So before we get into that story, just tell everyone a little bit about who you are and what you do with most of your time in the world.
Uh, so I'm Jason Willits, a small town kid from the middle of Nebraska. Fortunate to have had a very full life by just saying yes. I'm a bibliophile. My wife and I were arguing about whether or not it was bibliomania just earlier.
That's the
Tend to
condition.
That might be, I don't know if it might be biblioholic, so I just became addicted to data at some point. I work at a Barnes and Noble now. Had worked at Borders back in the day for a decade or so. Was deployed to Operation Iraqi Freedom initially. And when I first got notified, I was 21 and made a deal with God. I said, I will be a conscientious objector. I don't see the rationale. I don't believe the reasons that I don't see. I'm defending the Constitution of the United States against enemies, foreign and domestic. So I will trust in you if you allow me the data, give me the data that I need to be certain. And I can say that after, 23 years of playing Jacob, wrestling with the angel, I, I'm certain I've had that, so my entire Jason isn't really important. I would say the books. Let's talk more about these guys. Let's talk about some of the ideas that I've found over those 23 years or so, because I feel that's really more personal to me. It's more what I was brought here to do. I suppose it was the deal that I made. You know what I mean? Like, so the opportunities for that is a blessing, truly.
Well, that's what one of the immediate things I appreciated about you was you. I mean, okay, if we could fast forward to you teaching your resilience workshop at the Abbey, right? But you displayed that immediately when I was giving that background regarding us meeting just after COVID and how you just really seemed to take advantage of it as a time where you could plug into a lot of book groups that you didn't need to be geographically present for. I remember you were doing stuff, what it was back in Kansas when you were moving out to Delaware, right? So you just had this really great mindset in terms of like, this is providing me, while it's a really uncertain time and it's problematic, it's providing me with a window here of opportunity to take advantage of some things. And it spoke to this evolutionary time of change that we're in now
Mhm.
and how we can use that as a time to grow and develop. So, can you share a little bit about that journey that you were on then and maybe where it's taken you to now?
Well, so Tehard, the new sphere itself, for those of you not familiar with Teilhard's thought, you had geosphere, the Earth itself. You had the biosphere, the life that emerges from the Earth, and then you have the thought or the interactions that happen among those creatures within that Earth, that biosphere, that ecosystem, whatever it is. That fascinated me, and I could see through technology the new sphere developing an exoskeleton and life moving kind of from a more carbon base to evidently a more silicone based system. Saw that it was, one step below on the periodic table, thinking, there's a pattern to all of this. And it was Tehard that kind of guided that thought and helped me remain optimistic in that. But I hadn't encountered him when I had deployed. So I think I developed sort of that resilient mindset maybe and realized how much I'm nothing but 90% bacteria. I mean, I'm only 10% human, really cellular matter. So who are you to, insult? Really, I'm right. it's so much more important being aware rather than self-aware. I think we get so hung up on self. Pure awareness is just awe-striking if you allow it, but we get so hung up in when it comes to what I've developed in that line of thinking. You look at scale itself, and I urge your viewers to bring up The Power of 10 by is it Ray and Charles Epps, I believe, something Eames maybe. They're famous. I don't know, but it was put on a PBS. They can find it on YouTube. Maybe you could link to it or something. But when it comes to size, the single cell prokaryote in my large intestine is to me what I am to the earth. So who's Jason, was Jason, all that sort of thing. I'm a neuron really for Mother Ground. I hope to be. I really try to be. You know, as much, how can I relate to my environment? How can I educate, inspire, feed the neurons around me? You know, in all of this noosphere that Teilhard saw, right? When I profoundly just read a little while ago, little plug, Ian McGilchrist was like the Royal Librarian of England or something like that. Got in to be a psychiatrist instead. Psychology, studied that because he saw that literally the East and the West in their way of thinking mirror the left and right hemisphere of a brain. And Western enlightenment, post-enlightenment, that sort of thing, could be considered the evolution of the rational, you know, methodological materialist, break it all down, language center, left hemisphere, right? Teilhard's initial visions helps me see that. And so it makes sense that it would develop a line of communication that can transcend boundary, such as Kansas to Philadelphia. And COVID, it would make sense that something as seemingly destructive and damaging to the middle class economically of this country also could be a means for that to have happened, right? That what we consider bad, what we consider, we have no way to understand. It is good. It's developing. It's evolution. It's not we're not in charge as much as we wish we were, right? And I think scripturally, I'm seeing that in the masters that I'm awaiting, and I've just seen that to be the case, even in the worst of tragedies, or what we would consider tragedy, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah. And given your experiences in life, given your exposure to the front and your deployments, given what you've encountered here stateside at home, how do you hold those experiences together that have been challenging, maybe sometimes traumatic, with all that gives you hope? Like what allows you to hope?
I would say that I've lost sight of that hope often. I wouldn't say that I have. I would say that you've met a man that has developed a lot of resilience and come to a lot of maturity after years of not having that hope, or years of feeling hopeless, or years of feeling isolated and unable to share a hopeful vision because everyone's in selfhood rather than neuronic awareness hood, right? I've found that my first deployment, I was meditating regularly, put that into practice. It's Sufi meditation, 20 breaths. And I found that as I detached awareness from any ego, self, Jason, blah, 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 and just allowed pure awareness, that it allowed the profundity that Teilhard speaks to with the burning heart. But I was able to see that in a mud puddle. I was able to see that in the rain hitting a mud puddle, right? I was able to see that amazed, like the fact that I'm breathing and that's gift enough. And then if you want to get into it statistically, the fine tuning of the universe is 10 to the 120th, that estimated by physicists or whatever, that where it really comes down to that anthropic principle they have a problem with. It's that precise, right? That's 10 with 3 lines of zeros on a standard paper. I've written it out. That's 10 to the 120th. There's that many zeros at the end. That if the energy were any different, no life would exist. Like that. That's to start, and you're breathing. So I'm, like start there. And when you just allow that, when you just are coherent enough to allow that, then it's natural that you want to serve the relationships that then you find. You want to serve the environment that you're in. You want to serve because you appreciate just what it is and the potential of what it can be so much more.
Yeah, and I like how you said earlier too that differentiation between self-awareness and awareness, because I think of the phrase paralysis by analysis, whereby when we start to fill our heads with so much psychology and even like, reading spiritual principles and stuff like that, and you really start to move all that from the neck up or to the neck up, it becomes hard to be present. It becomes hard to really savor that current state we're in and the ephemeralness of it. It becomes hard to be present in our bodies. I wonder if that's maybe part of the reason why that we are so disconnected from the earth and the biosphere consciously, in so many ways. Our infatuation with technology is a big part of that for sure. And that really, applies mostly to the neck up. But yeah, and it seems like those technologies are becoming more and more immersive in an embodied sense, even, with VR, where now you're putting the goggles on your head, right? You're putting the haptic suit on where you're feeling the responses from the game you're engaging in a virtual space. And that's just like a lot to think about,
Yeah, I mean,
a lot to analyze and keep up here. We have to put that in here in some way.
it really is. It is so much more lived experience, right? I mean, you think we're going to be able to turn off the commercials when that Neuralink is installed? Oh God. Oh,
You have to
we
wait
get
till the ad finishes before you continue,
oh,
right?
just to do any daily chore. It's like wait until the ad finishes for the new toilet paper before you finish your business. It's a horrible future. But if everyone were just naturally within a few generations, the desert is the sand. So within a few generations, we could be looking at a whole different way of thinking that emerges out of this within humans, right? That we just naturally recognize that relationship over self, finally realize that self is never going to be satiated, you know, and live in relation to each other, right? And to those who have known Jason throughout his life, it's probably going to sound like Jason's such a hypocrite right now because he's been such an egoic asshole sometimes, right? And that's where I think reconciliation is so important, and humility. It was only through Orthodox practice, and orthodoxy, something that appealed to me, or something I learned to appreciate, I suppose, by just putting it into practice, was the practice of Pascha. We're starting, you in the West have started Ash Wednesday tonight, right? We just came out of the goats and the sheep. So last Sunday, and then the Sunday prior to that is the publican and the Pharisee. So you are starting off with this utter humility, and then we go into this week is cheese allowed, dairy. Meat fair was last week. This coming will be cheese fair Sunday, and the fasting, the prayer daily, 5 times a day if you can manage, right? These memorized prayer and allowing yourself to be sort of transformed by that practice gets to a point where you're in the middle of a service on a Wednesday night and it's, you're starving because you haven't eaten yet all day, and you haven't eaten much for a few 40 days throughout the whole thing. It's Easter's right around the corner, And you hear that whiny little ego. Just, I don't want to pray. I don't want to be thankful for breathing. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to go through the service. Do we have to? Oh my God, I'm hungry. Or you just realize you're carrying that around with you all the time. And it's exhausting. And there's nobody out there that's saying, hey, you can put that ego down. It's all saying, hey, you need this to be happy. Hey, you need this to be happier. Hey, you should buy this all the time. We're living in it. And you have to have that space somehow to realize that it doesn't have to control you before you develop ways to keep it from controlling you. And it takes, so far for me, 23 years of practice, and I'm almost starting to get it, But as I told my interpreter, Omid, he and I were discussing the similarities between Islam and Orthodoxy because of this putting into practice that is so important to Islam and submission that comes from that. Here, when I visited him here in November, I said, scripture and that practice can only get you so far. I need an example. Just be that example. And anytime your little ego's whining and moaning, you'll be like, when God was incarnate, he was crucified. You being crucified right now? Do you feel like you're burning from within because of the nerves in your body? Do you have the scorched back scrubbed against that rough wood as your body is cramping? So you've got burning alive, feeling of that, right? You've got the cramping of all of your muscles. You've got that back pain. You can't straighten, you can't breathe, you can't do anything. And as I told my interpreter, from that position, you're quoting a psalm that is the perfect thing to say at the perfect time and asking, Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. You're still asking for the forgiveness of those around you. Do that. Suck at it? Cool. Go to church for a while, get better at it. That's great. You got until the end of your life. Just hope to close that gap a little more. You're walking bacteria having a human experience anyway. What more can you hope for? Right?
We're spiritual walking bacteria having a human experience, right?
Yeah.
No,
We're little packets of that awareness. And science is more and more realizing that awareness isn't just coming from me. It's actually, I'm more of an antenna for some collective awareness. And as I become more focused on the awareness instead of the self-awareness, then I can listen to my environment and catch all of the synchronicity that methodological materialists can't explain, that always reminds me, hey, you are a node of awareness called to service. You're called to be the image and likeness of your creator. You're created to be the steward, not the master, but the steward of the creation that you've inherited. Mm-hmm. Be of service to yourself, future generations, be of service to those organisms around you, be of service to your environment. There's always something to serve. Occupy your time with that. You'll find so much more fulfillment than listening to little stupid ego Jason. And it's whiny little hungry needs.
Yeah. We need to certainly bypass our ego and put it in its place. I just got done recording an episode with Angela Mano from the ATA, an artist. And we talked about I can't remember the Swami. I have to look this up. This is a twofer thing. I'm recording 2 episodes today. So I haven't had a chance to look that up. Swami Vivekananda? Maybe not. But at any rate, Ram Dass quoted the Swami in saying that the ego is a wonderful servant, but a terrible master. And it needs a mission, it needs a purpose, it needs a goal to work towards. Otherwise, it just starts, like you said previously, like in that, nuance of self-awareness, it just starts thinking about itself and what its needs are, what it needs to be secure, safe, bolstered, whatever, right?
Yep. And it's always looking out, going, what can I obtain? What can I gain mastery of?
Yeah.
What can I adopt? That's something I love. One of my favorite books is by Chuck Palahniuk, and he does Chinese syntax in a Chinese exchange student coming to America, being very critical of consumerism. And all bright, loud colors scream, "Adopt me." He goes into Walmart first thing, and it's just his commentary on just, and it's so true that
Yeah.
we are so unconsciously controlled by what happiness we seek for little whiny little Jason, baby Jason,
Hmm.
right?
Well, with your characterization of the ego there, which I really appreciate, the whiny ego at that, especially.
I'm
Uh,
trying to keep this G, man, you know?
yeah, 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 yeah. Where's the role of humor within tough times, tension, trauma? Because this is something
It,
else you've talked about before.
yeah, I don't know. It's hard to articulate without sounding like I'm being flippant to suffering or flippant to grief or flippant to any of it. That today would have been my father's 70th birthday. He passed almost a year and a half now ago. And so I've had a year and a half to reflect on what that absence feels like. And you really get to know your relationship with someone through that absence often, right? What do you miss about them when they're not there? What conversations do you miss having? What could have you had? That sort of thing, right? I, on one mission, I was just reflecting with, sharing with the moral engagement group and sharing with Dr. Denton at Moravian, Denton Borhan at
Hmm.
Moravian there, Kelly,
Hmm.
that I was sharing with her class a story that we were rolling into a city of Baghdad, and there's a donkey carcass that had been stuffed with an improvised explosive device, and it had gone off. And my co-driver called it roadkill and laughed and made it a joke, right? And then the next instant, we were right next to a car bomb. And you get to a point where you have to make light and humor out of your situation. And I think you can only do that when you have the confidence that this is not all there is, and that you just be you just accept that death is no longer something to be afraid of, but something that is ahead. It's just ahead for all of
Had
us.
you read had you read Teilhard yet at that point?
Not by my first tour. No, I had read Kierkegaard's Fear and Trembling, though, and
Yeah.
that's a great concept of faith, and what faith really boils down to, and how faith and madness can be apparently the same or seemingly the same, often in ways.
Well, I'm just thinking of the instance of when he was confronted by his fellow soldiers in terms of not displaying a fear of death when he was in the trenches, and he said, "When I die, I'll just change states," or something to that effect.
And I don't know that at that time I had the same confidence that I do now. I think I've become so accustomed to death, and I think as you age, you become accustomed to death.
Hmm.
And in reanalyzing Genesis as much as I have for my thesis, and realizing that the very original Hebrew and Septuagint say death by death, you will die by death, not you will surely die, as they assumed it was emphasis, and so it makes sense to translate the Masoretic text that it surely die and all that. But death by death, that to me says it's a spiritual thing. Makes sense that Adam lived another 930 years after that. Yet, you will die by fear of. You will die by feeling you are separate from, only because you're biologically encapsulated.
Mhm.
The biology around you only gives you the sensation to be the feedback loop of your environment so that you can be a steward to your environment. Your body itself changes every 8 years. It's composed, like I said, of 90% bacteria. If you just did a cell count, you're only 10% human cellular matter anyway. You're only 8 years old. So there's that continuity of essence, though, that somehow is there. Jason, I can tell you when it comes to that humor, Mom told Jason that he needed to go put on his pants, and they were little training pants, little predecessors to pull ups, right? but you didn't tell Jason where he needed to put them on. And so Jason has a picture of him when he's little with them on his head and him grinning from ear to ear, thinking he's so clever because he put them on, he listened. And I can tell you that essence, somehow that captures the essence of everything that I've done right and wrong in my life, it seems like. It's just, that humor is there, I think, maybe just because of me. But I've been through enough, I think, that I just have learned. I'll laugh about it eventually, and I might as well get a head start. Because again, I'm living, I'm breathing. Any grief is, I will eventually see them. We'll catch up on all this. It'll be great. And I hope that I behave in a way that, last words I said to my father is, I will make you proud. I hope to make you proud. That's it, as much as I can. That man was my hero, and, right? So, humor is what keeps you afloat, I suppose. And there's humor. They probably won't like it. You probably won't like the humor, but it's there. You can make it pretty funny.
Well, if you're in a tough situation, then the humor is probably going to reflect that, right? But if you're in the tough situation, you'll probably appreciate that then. So, yeah. Well, we're certainly in a collective tough situation as a species right now. I don't know that we've ever not been, but we are certainly hyper aware of that red light blinking on the control panel, so to speak. Now it seems like more as a species. And you've alluded to a lot of change that you've experienced in your own personal journey. So how do you balance and or hold together that fractal nature of change that we're experiencing in the world through evolution on the large scale, as well as on the micro of your own life? When it feels like, I guess in another way to ask that question, when it feels like maybe you're making great strides personally, but the world is where it is at a standstill or, struggling or whatever. Or maybe sometimes it's, wow, look at the vastness of evolution, but then my life is maybe, so small. How do you balance that dynamic?
Well, what I guess always gives me hope in that, in that dynamic itself, and I always try to keep in mind, the desert is the sand. That the church in its truest form, as commissioned by Christ, is those who are Christ to others and see Christ suffering under the ego of others, right? And we are to care and heal those neurons of Mother Ground. It makes sense in that regard. I think that we're 2,000 years behind on making it happen because we assumed it was some sort of judicial system, legal, rational exercise rather than being Christ to the world around us often enough. And yet, we could start the Perusia tomorrow. If you're inspired, share this video. It'll double. Then they'll share and it'll double. And, we get that line of thinking of just naturally being selfless and being Jesus to others and seeing Christ under the ego of others. You tend to love every one of them for all their flaws, because you see that potential, because you see how just silly their problems are. They're not being crucified. How silly. I mean, I don't mean that to be, again, callous in that regard. I can empathize more with it because I've been there. And I can sit there with them in that space and allow them to just express themselves if necessary and just, be in that space and not feel shame for that. And just being there, being present next to them. If I can offer anything, offer it to them. And then going on to helping the next, right? Doing that within a generation or two, we make that the norm. we have the parousia. We're no longer sitting back waiting for, as I love John Hott, Dr. Jack, and his theology of the future, his ideas of the future. Like, just as a prokaryote in my gut, I had a thing earlier. I was going to say that atheism and agnosticism about like two prokaryotes in my gut arguing about the existence of human, right? Um, uh, it is what we have our being in. It's the creative principle. I'm sorry that somebody raised you to believe that it was Santa Claus in the sky, but it's the creative principle that we can participate in. It's the creative principle that, and Christ was somehow the incarnation of the Tao. Christ was somehow the incarnation of that creative principle to spark the new phase, to have a phase shift. And we are called to have the next phase shift being this Christ-like behavior between, what are we up to, 8.6 billion neurons? And if we saw East and West as different ways of thinking of the same reality rather than in need of some you versus me existential threat, and we can see the intrinsic growth that's possible with 8.6 billion neurons, we don't need the existential threat. We've matured beyond it, and it's time we as a species matured beyond little ego self-awareness and into pure awareness of service and non-zero sum game. It's game theory rather than mechanics. And Dawkins himself said that rather than a mechanistic perspective of life as he approaches life, and as we tend to do within methodological materials, Newton, post-Newton world, game theory could provide a worthy alternative, he claims. Robert Wright explored game theory and found that the same logos that Philo of Alexandria and I would say Maximus the Confessor saw within every organism was that driving principle that is allowing for greater evolutionary advantage and greater complexity to arise as entities come together and recognize what is different between them. That line of thinking leads to this: we all will be Christ-like to each other. It's reciprocal altruism. Unfortunately, Robert Wright spends the last 2/3 of his book, Evolution of God, trying to claim that Christ was made up and that Philo of Alexandria was not what John was inspired by, that John kind of hijacked the idea. It's, there's this refusal to accept anything that can't be weighed or measured that is left over thanks to the methodological materialism of Newton and the Enlightenment. But that has gone too far so that nothing that can't be measured can be real, if that makes sense. If we can't measure it immediately, it can't be real, quote unquote. And so we don't recognize that just as energy and self empties into matter, matter self empties into life, life self empties into intelligence, and we are the forefront of that.
Yeah.
Sorry for the brain dump.
No. I was there. There was one thing that that really stood out to me that I was going to respond to, but then I lost it because I got start thinking about another thing that you had there. Oh shoot. Well, maybe it'll come back to me. But the one thing I want to go back to for sure that I had initially made a note of was Ian McGilchrist and this notion of the hemisphered brain, right? And that's something I appreciate too. Is how and this is one of the areas where you and I connected in addition to Teilhard, but and it goes back to my previous question that I just asked you. This ability to telescope in our perspective, I'm talking about you and I, in our perspective, in our experience, in our interpersonal dynamics, to be able to go from like the mega scale down to like, the just some crazy thing that's happening maybe, and we're observing my kids are doing whatever at my house when we're hanging out or something, right? But we're able to connect it in some way. And I just really appreciate that about you and your ability to articulate that. And like someone like McGilchrist, who is also a similar mind and giving us this kind of macro view of things in that way. That's something I appreciate and want to affirm you for being able to do. So,
Well, thank you. It's just again these guys. I mean, there's something spectral going up on here. I'm spectrum
yeah,
somewhere.
but you know,
It's undiagnosed, but my parents are pretty sure type thing. But
despite what we want to say about the ego, it serves its purpose, and beyond ego, personality, and the personality of Jason is something
I
I'm
suppose
greatly appreciative of. So, yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But
I don't think our egos would be able to laugh as much as we are able to about certain things. And
no,
yeah,
no, not at all.
yeah,
It's got an image to uphold, and it's just
yeah,
so
yeah.
exhausting.
So you mentioned a deployment to Iraq, and then there was
Hmm.
Afghanistan,
Hmm.
and Tayard also served on the front of World War One, and you having served on the front in the global war on terror. What do you make of this concept of the front? I put in air quotes that you experience while on deployment compared to, say, the front of evolution. And how do you understand everyone as being called to participate and, as you've said earlier, serve in that way?
Yeah, Teilhard saw the future of humanity etched in the earth. However, it's going to turn out. It was literally right there in front. Like I hate literally refers to literature, and I hate when people use that, and I just used it. It was physically there, etched in the earth. This is the future. This is the however things turn out along this line, the future of humanity will be affected. And so I've always tried to just have in my background, back thinking, that being a participant in history, I think, and I had that before I read Teilhard, but I think it goes directly back to a faith that it's so self-important looking back, but God would move mountains if I had the faith of a mustard seed, and my refusal to be a conscientious objector and instead be the best soldier I could be for the men I was serving next to, and to do the best job I could for the people of Afghanistan, or the best job I could to minimize the damage I was doing to the people of Iraq. I felt that historic mission thrust upon me in a way because I was 21, and here are your letters. And that maybe that was Teilhard's impetus as well, that you can't help it when you've participated in something that has changed humanity, and you've been right there. And I've been fortunate in that in my life. I was right there at the Democratic National Convention when it was between Hillary and Obama, 2008. I was there between Israel and Palestine when the Palestinian organization leader Mahmoud Abbas was first allowed to step foot on Palestinian soil in 10 years. I was there. I've just been able to participate firsthand in so many moments of history that I can only be grateful and pass that forward and try to awaken those who have been comfortable all of their lives to realize that their life is the front, that they are participating in the history of humanity, that they are passing along a legacy. Whether it's what they want to pass along or not, they need to be conscious of the fact that they're passing it along. They need to be conscious of the fact that you are creating the future that your own children will live within, right? What sort of future do you want them to have? Well, that just so matches with the Perusia. That just so matches with the Omega Point. That just so matches with, let's build that. It's time to grow up. Stop the infighting. It really is, And I think that, especially our generation and younger, we've matured beyond the culture war. We grew up without it being such an identifier necessarily. We were given our own culture wars, maybe. But I think that the conversations that I have with people, nobody's tied enough to tradition to cling to it rigidly, which causes its own conflict in that evolutionary change that we need. We need to be so much more fluid. And so I see this generation being capable of the Parousia. I see this generation capable of Omega. I see this generation capable of being, maybe it's because of the technology in the virtual world, they're capable of thinking outside of the methodological materialism of a separate Jason conversing with a separate Andrew who's going to go off to our 9 to 5 and, for 80 years, sweat by the brow, innovating our work into bread, when there's fruit all around us, like the fall does, it's just, I think that the front itself is your life if you choose to accept it, but don't be bored. For heaven's sake, please don't be bored. There's so much the world needs right now from you. If you recognize it and you just see it, your life as that moment of history in your own community, in your own little world,
There's so much the world needs from you right now. I'm writing that
You
down.
can't be bored. How dare you? Right?
You
You're
can't be
breathing.
bored.
You're breathing. You're breathing. You got all you need. Congratulations. That food can wait. That
My
distraction can
kid,
wait.
yeah,
The
they
world
didn't know
needs
what
you.
the word bored was or meant until they heard one of their friends say it. Then they started saying it. And it's just like, what a virus.
Right? I didn't even know it. Right? And that's how we are as kids. That's the thing with self-awareness, unfortunately. And what I love about my reading of Genesis or whatever is that just the dissatisfaction. The moment you contemplate, is it good enough? In
Yeah.
a world created good, is the second before you go, of course it's not good enough. We're going to die. Of course it's not good enough. I don't have enough to eat. Of course it's not good enough. I'm not rich enough. Of course not. I'm not good enough. I'm not good looking enough. You are walking bacteria having the human experience and have breath. And that breath is of God, according to scripture. Like, God gives the functionality, according to scripture, that natural selection can't find. So, like, that creative principle is a part of your personal awareness experience if you just get over yourself for a bit.
I'm just thinking of like episode titles, and I'm thinking of like the bacterial miracle.
We're dust, Adamah. So, according to the original Hebrew, it's Adamah, which is mother ground, really, that Adam is formed, and Adam is man, as in mankind, until the Toledot structure, the generations of man, the Adam, the dude, doesn't start until like chapter 5. So, it's the story of mother ground's relation to humanity all through chapter 5. That includes Cain and Abel, that includes the fall of man, that includes, and the minute we in paradise, right before the fiber revolution, right before we domesticated animals to such an extent that we could clothe, that we as humanity, right, that civilization itself grew because we could clothe the known world, and it's so much more comfortable than fiber. The fiber plant clothing that they had to make, I got wool. Like, well, this is awesome, right? So that despair, that productivity allowed for the stratification necessary for civilization to emerge. And the minute their eyes of the two of them are opened, they're dissatisfied. Or it's the dissatisfaction that opens the two of the eyes, right? And all of a sudden, you go on to have the Tower of Babel. You go on to have, all the descendants of Cain are, and the reason Cain's sacrifice itself is it's a sense of self-sufficiency. Farming itself is, I'm going to, Genesis 2, sorry, Adam is supposed to make Ha'arez, which is the earth, into Ha'issa, I think, which is the field. So the more productive version of ground. The minute that, and to do so on behalf of the creator again, rather than self-sufficiency, I'm going to create my own livelihood and determine that I can do it myself and I don't need God and blah, 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 right? Well, Cain's livelihood is that of farming in that regard. And that all of his descendants is that of civilization and music and all the peoples of mankind that assume they can do it themselves, I suppose. So the lesson isn't something other than necessarily just it's a world created good until human innovation tries to hijacks the functionality that's already there and tries to innovate its own self-sufficiency. And the minute we do that, we have cloud seeding, and or destroying. You know what I mean? How far have we taken that? To think that we can control everything, because especially a methodological materialism world where we are just these little ants running around rather than neurons of a symbiotic system.
Yeah, and it seems like there is some self-correction along the way whereby certain commonplace cultural practices institutionalized within institutions and systems, and therefore cultures and ways of being, are experiencing change and an evolution back to their roots in a way. I'm thinking things like birthing, things like agriculture, right? We're recognizing the value that was lost at the being able to make things more expedient or efficient or scale to a certain level, right? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the industrialization of agriculture.
I mean, it's like pasteurization served a purpose at a time when refrigeration wasn't as common and you had to transport, right? But and now you see, I guess we shouldn't get into raw milk. We don't want the podcast to get demonetized, whatever they call it. Yeah, I'm not making any money off this.
Canceled. You're gonna get into cancel
That's
culture,
it.
right? Cancel.
No, but you're seeing a turn back to some more natural ways, we could call it, maybe, of being in rhythm, of homeostasis, of harmony with the earth, with other people, with industry in that way. I think of Thomas Berry, who called himself an ecologian. He talked about how this reorientation on the planet needed to happen across the board, from the healthcare system to the banking system to government to religions, education.
And yet, I know of a friend of mine's daughter who's studying economics, really, to figure out a healthier future. Like there's, I think the self-correction that you speak to is just the natural recognition of the vacuums that are left behind by our attempts at fixing the last problem we made for ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's great as long as we have an identity that is collective in care and compassion, and the way of the world itself has to teach you to be selfish. As you said, the children didn't even know they were bored until somebody told them.
Yeah.
Like the world itself and its egoic illusion, it's a stubborn delusion that everybody's living in. But at the heart of so many problems that so many people I've heard blame on God is actually an egoic outlook of either the individual or the institution. And you can see that they've broken away from the synergetic relationship and gone on about their own, I'm going to do it my way for the sake of my own power. But that was necessary. And it wasn't, I'm glad you brought McGilchrist back up, I didn't even, in reading his book, I could see even 1492 in the beginnings of Columbus coming over and the seeds of the Enlightenment literally wiping out a Paleolithic mind, hemisphere of the mind, right? A Paleolithic, 2 continents of a Paleolithic culture that was thriving. And that, of course, has been tragic and is horrific. And we can dwell on the tragedy of that, and we can dwell on the death and the pain and all that. Or we can say, well, but now the left hemisphere of a lucid humanity is taking hold because of the freedom allowed and the thinking allowed through that freedom to create anew, and the innovation of the Enlightenment, the innovation of the rational thinking, just as long as we also recognize that it's the left hemisphere and the rational line of thinking that's obsessed with power
Hmm.
more so than anything, and dial that back. And something that I love to see in Rome, having conversation with the ecumenical patriarch Bartholomew, something I love to see in that Rome is hungering for new participants because it has been so in its own head for generations that it's lost so many. And yet you have a return to, after Vatican II, what was lost in, what about the mystic experience did we lose? How do we get the mystic back, right? And in your conversation with Bartholomew and in Orthodoxy's growth in North America, I think you'll recognize some of that mysticism that you lost and some of that spiritual practicing, like you say, lived experiential liturgy that you have. And it'll fit really nice. You know what I mean? Like the shell is still there perfectly to have a new life. We are still, we if we empower our youth, we will have that same new future. We just got to stop poisoning them with the old prejudices and the old egoic attitudes.
Yeah, yeah, that's where that self-correction gives me hope, and seeing how it's not just individual people or communities, but there is some systemic change too. I mean, I just, for example, something simple like using less um, processed products for babies and very young children, right? Skin creams, shampoos, stuff like that, right? There's so much preservatives and dyes and scents and stuff like that that are really not necessary or helpful for a young being in that way. And when my daughter was born 8 years ago, the selection was a lot less limited than it is now. And just like, it's like you just see like in groups online and stuff like that, people are looking for alternatives, not just for skincare products for their kids or for themselves, right? We don't want to put toxic stuff on our skin, but they're looking for alternatives. They're looking for a different way, a new way. And sometimes we find that value in the past. Sometimes we need to, in contemplation and humility, allow it to emerge from a combination of our own effort and then what, God is willing and in a way calling us to, I guess, right? Would you say?
Yeah, here I've been whining and moaning about the corporate capture of my alleged representative government for 20 some years. But we vote with our dollar, and the Buyer app has just been released, and it's going to change the face of how we interact with big mega corporation owned business. And so there we have the innovation that within a generation, mega corporation can no longer be mega corporation. It's just no longer economically feasible. We voted with our dollar and taken back the control of not only the ingredients, but who actually owns the real products in every product in the grocery store, every product that is our sustenance,
Yeah.
right? We get
So,
to take
so
that back.
like in a sentence, that app allows you to see who you're supporting by buying that product.
Yeah, and it's
Okay.
extremely user friendly. It's just you scan the barcode, it tells you exactly the company itself, who actually owns that brand,
Mhm.
gives you the ingredients, gives you whatever. If you don't find it, then you know it's local. You know that, hey, and you can enter it yourself. Makes, a nerd like me buying groceries, I'm having a blast. I'm just, Verdiana hates it because I'm sitting there for 2 or 3 hours like, let's update the app, let's take down the man together, woo, It's like spray painting a Pennywise logo right there on the wall instead.
That's great. We'll have to put a link in there to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so something I wanted to talk about was that you invited me to be a part of a healing ceremony, and very grateful and honored to be welcome to that. This healing ceremony was through the VA, through your moral injury group that you're participating in, right? You might need to correct me on some of these details.
Well,
But what stood out to me, I mean, it was a very impactful experience to be there and to hear what people shared and just to be a part of the ritual. But one of the things that really stood out to me was this language of returning home. And I'm just curious because it's not something we ever talked about. And if you'd be okay with me asking you now, what does this theme of returning home mean to you?
it's going to be hard to not seem like I have solved all of that. Like the process of returning home and the language itself came with the process in a way. So once again, I don't want to sound like somebody who 3 or 4 years ago, the people that have known me all my life would listen to this and just be like, wow, like why didn't he think these things and act on these things 3 years ago? I wasn't even introduced. I had no idea what a moral injury was. I had no idea what a moral engagement. There was a moral engagement group. What? I had none of that until I was researching my thesis, going to the Penn Museum, Journey to the City, the evolution of culture, civilization itself, the evolution that I spoke over a little earlier, fiber evolution, the creation of the ziggurats, all of that sort of thing. I got to see the burial dress of the queen who was buried in a chamber that I had meditated in, 20 years prior. And in Christmas Eve in 2024, in 2004. And I just realizing that I'm one of so few that got to see both the actual grounds that burial shroud came out of and the shroud itself. You know, since the 30s, nobody's probably seen both together, right? Unless they've traveled. It's just, and again, it was just saying yes to whatever came my way and no real plan of action, no real any of that. And yet I was able to have that experience. And the tour guide was an Iraqi man. And he said, hi, I'm Yarub. He's going to, if he watches this, he doesn't sound like, that's meant to convey excitement, not that he's got a high voice. I'm Yarub. Hi, I'm from Nippur. I'm from Iraq. He points to it on the map behind him. And knowing just enough Arabic to get me in trouble, I said, Marhaba Yarub, kif halak, ismi Jason. I'm sorry for invading your country. And this is probably in front of 15 tourists. And Yarub just kind of smiled and he kind of laughed a bit. He's like, there's a moral engagement group on Thursday happening. There's a public event. You need to go to that. It's just like, okay, yeah, I'll take care of it. And he introduced me to the group and everything. He and I have become close, since then. And I've had so many wonderful opportunities being introduced to him, listening, again, that synchronicity surfing, just being aware enough to just interact with the environment and not self-aware enough that you miss opportunities maybe. Through the moral engagement group, they do this public ceremony. They have I believe it's a 12-week course where veterans like myself, who are often misdiagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, go and discuss what moral injury is, how it is different, what is similar, that sort of thing, how it might affect you. It's a lot of really eye-opening scholarship thanks to Kelly. And the chaplain and psychiatrist at the VA, Chris Antal and Peter Yeomans, they've done 8 maybe or 9 now, so it's only been going on for 4 or 5 years. They had to readapt, they adjust fire for COVID, try to make it online, because like you said, it was a coming home thing. After 12 weeks of learning that sort of thing, these veterans go and share with the public at a public event their moral injury, what they've brought home. And that act, the responses that are bulleted in the bulletin, the responses that are expected of the public, those who choose to participate, those who, every step of the way, you noticed, we're always checking the pulse. If you want to participate, this is what you do. If you want to participate, this is what you do. It becomes a dialogue between the civilians and the veterans. And it becomes a coming home truly, because the civilians accept the undue moral weight that otherwise is only placed on the veteran coming home. And the veteran can only share occasionally, and maybe over a beer or two, and only with close friends that, or people that have been there or whatever. It broadens that moral responsibility for the public action, so that even though I didn't have a declaration of war in my pocket that would have given me the sense of purpose that I needed, and the sense of you having my back as a civilian population when I was sent there, I got to experience at least the acceptance from strangers. But the public at large, representative of the public at large, I got to hear that responsibility taken, that we have done these things to you in a way, in sending you there. We collectively somehow need to take responsibility for that. And that was what I really needed as a morally injured veteran. Evidently. I had no idea the impact it would have on me. I had no idea how much until I did further reading, and once again realized that there's so much that is beyond what you can articulate. You have to be given the language, and then what's mentionable is manageable if you're given the language.
Thank you for explaining that, and for, again, inviting me to participate in that. That was special, and grateful to have that experience. And grateful too that you were able to take the time now to explain it, because it helped me understand it a lot better too, coming from you. I know that, is it Chris is his name? He did a great job welcoming everyone. But
Chaplain.
yeah, but I really appreciate your own explanation of that. Yeah. And I don't know, how widely that is offered across the country, but I can only imagine
Yes,
that.
we're the only one. We're the pioneers.
Wow.
The director of the VA has been informed of it and is excited. I'm going to be planting it in Topeka, or the Manhattan Vet Center area, and hoping it sprouts. We're going to take that and we'll take lessons learned and recreate it, and hope to have it throughout the country. And as Kelly says, our veterans really can be the prophets, the prophetic voice that we really need, to call to account our civilians to get a hold of their government before it does something stupid, any more stupid than it already has been for 25 years, 24 and a half. It is something that we hope to sprout. The Pentagon has also heard about it, and they have claimed that it's too anti-war and are trying to squash it. We even now we need to fill out a lot more paperwork now just to get permission to do it than we did before the current executive took control of the VA. So we are also looking at starting a nonprofit to sort of continue the awareness in a way. But you're talking the very early stages, man. I mean, 8 cohorts. I think it's 4 years? 5 years now that they've only
Yeah.
been doing it. So it's so crazy fortunate that I was in the Philadelphia area at the UPenn Museum having that conversation. Like, cool. All right. Guess I got a new mission.
Yeah, I don't mean to get sentimental for our guests here, but grateful to share those Fridays with you when you would take the train up from
Oh, I miss it
Philly.
too, man. I
We'd get
do.
to hang out after you go to the moral engagement group. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Friday was always great, man. It
yeah,
was, yes, nice train hop over, hang out with you and the kids. That was always so great.
yeah.
Take the afternoon after discussing with them things that were brand new to me, and then just sit back and see normal life, honestly, a little bit. You know what I mean? Get out of Jason's own world of his own head and his own books and just enjoy that so much. Yeah.
Well, it seemed to be a real steady thing for you, so grateful that I could be on the tail end of it that way with the kids. Yeah, yeah.
Very
Well,
much.
yeah, man, I've been so grateful for everything that you've been willing to share today, and beyond, of course. So as we get toward the end of our recorded interview here together, um, we've talked a lot about faith, we've talked about evolution, we've talked about hope, challenge. Where are these things clicking for you nowadays? Where are you finding synergy with the sacred? How are you? How are you finding synergy?
A The archdiocese put together a essentially correspondence course through which I could get a graduate degree in theology from Balamand University in Lebanon. That was another project that's only been in the works maybe for 10, 15 years now. Just gained accreditation in North America, full accreditation in North America, probably a year or two ago. And so I have unfortunately gone into that without the professional awareness to understand how limited a master's thesis really needs to be, and put together a dissertation, knowing me, of course. But that allowed me to have the scholarship necessary to reconcile what would have been the Scopes trial, Genesis versus science, and so many of my friends claiming that they can't believe in God because they believe in science, and they can't take the Bible as history in a way that allows them to believe in the creative principle in their lives, I suppose. But I look forward to finally having that finished up. And other than that, just seeing what the opportunities that I've been invited to here, being closer to the Teilhard Association, being closer to being able to participate, coming back every year for sure for the annual get-togethers, but maintaining the things that I've learned, the opportunities I've gotten over the last 3 or 4 years, maintaining that now back in the Midwest, where I can rejuvenate my relationships and remind people, hopefully, of what those relationships were all about to begin with. I hope to be starting maybe a podcast, Chief Among Sinners podcast, with some of this scholarship once I am credentialed. But as it stands right now, I'm sort of just waiting on that, I think.
Just do it now, man. Just start now. That way you work out all the kinks, and then you get the letters, and then you soar.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. There you go.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. We wish you a lot of luck in Verdiana going forward. We're going to miss you guys for sure. Again, I don't want to get all sentimental on the podcast here for people, but Jason is a great friend, not just to me, but to my family as well. So yeah, very grateful for everything that he shared with us today. Where can people find you online or connect with you? You've mentioned these upcoming projects that you have when you're done this transition back to the Midwest here. I think too, we got to get you on like Sean Ryan or something with the. No, you're from the pilot group.
Honestly, honestly, that'd be great. So I just saw Sean Ryan this afternoon, maybe discuss He said, and angrily yelled about knowing in his heart what a lie the Operation Iraqi Freedom portion was, because of how much he saw Kellogg, Brown and Root behind everything in Iraq, and that is Dick Cheney's pet company. And that was the exact sentiment that I had going in, exact sentiment I saw around me, and exact sentiment that I carried back home as moral injury. So yeah, I mean, if you know Sean, you just put him in touch. I'll just talk all day about moral injury. That'd be great.
We'll clip you talking about. We'll clip you doing that. We'll got to go viral.
There you go. We'll just throw that around. I think that right now, probably through LinkedIn, really just searching me through that while I build this Chief Among Sinners podcast. It comes from a prayer from St. John Christoph, and a part of the liturgy we say every day of whom I am chief. I believe that, this is for me, of this, chief among sinners of whom I am chief. So it's a way to keep humble. And like I said, you're 90% bacteria animated with breath. That's a gift in itself. That's a miracle in itself. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Use that to be of relation to the world around you in the unique manner that you're capable of relating. And we need you so much. I'll figure out where you can find me online as I build that. But otherwise, I don't know.
Well, thank you, brother.
Share this and support Andrew. How's that? Support Teilhard. Come to the American Teilhard Association retreats.
Yeah, come to a retreat. Meet Jason in person.
There you go.
Bask in his aura.
Oh, jeez. Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah, never go full Willits. Like one of my young soldiers said, never go full Willits. Never go full Willits. Yeah. Well, too late.
No, but Jake can tell you that these past couple events have been wonderful these past couple of years. And for anyone that's interested and looking to synergize in person and, feel that quantum exchange of energy and electrons in that way, please come, join us in person for the conversation, for the fellowship, for the ritual. It's a very rich weekend, and I don't think that you'll leave hungry in any sense. We want you to be nourished physically, spiritually, in all ways, mentally. So it'll be great. But yeah, so grateful for Jason, all that he shared with us today. I look forward to seeing you soon, brother, in person, and look forward to having you on again. Well, when you're out in Kansas, you connect again.
There you go. Give you a tour of the place.
Yeah, we'll see the new podcast studio.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, brother. Good talking with you.
Thank you so much for this.
Thank you.